Hello, and welcome to the Next Gen Warrior podcast. As always, I am your host, Dan Hamilton, Marine Corps veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Today I have a great opportunity to sit down with Darden Smith, singer and songwriter here in Austin, Texas. As always, the Voices of Veterans program and the Next Gen Warrior podcast is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and the Veterans Land Board. Darden, first of all, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, thank you.
You are the first musician that we've had on the show, so I look forward to getting some of your experiences about your work in the veterans community.
Yes, absolutely.
For those who may be unfamiliar with Songwriting with Soldiers and your career as it spanned over the last couple decades, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I started playing music here in Austin, started writing songs when I was 10 years old, grew up in Brenham, Texas, and I've just been making records for 35 years, and that's been great. I had enough success to keep going, did pretty well, not massively well, but pretty well. And then about 7 years ago, I started a program along with a friend of mine named Mary Judd. We started this program, Songwriting with Soldiers. And what Songwriting with Soldiers does, it brings together professional songwriters with wounded soldiers and their families. And when I say soldiers, I'm not keeping out the Marines.
That's right. I know. Yeah. Sometimes we get a little offended by those things. So I
just want to say that.
All right.
All right. Along with their families and couples, but we bring professional songwriters together with that group to write songs based on their stories. So we're not teaching songwriting, and we're not in any way, we don't recruit songwriters. We recruit just normal people, everyday veterans of all branches, because we believe that and we consciously also are civilian-led. We're not military, we're not government, we're not religious, we're civilian.
You're just average
civilian,
people in the community.
Well, creative professionals. Bringing our skills and our craft to serve this particular community, which is the veteran community. We work with both 9/11 and all the way back into Vietnam age, bringing them together. We've been in existence for 7 years, and we've had over 40, almost 50 retreats now. This year we'll do 40 one-day programs. We'll do 9 full 3-day retreats. We've written over 500 songs. It's a massive project. It's a nonprofit, so it's a 501c3. And the best part of it is that, for me personally, my skills, I've been writing songs all my life. And I believe in story, and I believe in the transformational power of telling your story. And I do it with songs. And my friends, that's how we do it. And this happens to be how we make our living. But it's also, if we could help other people tell their story, you never know who can be served by hearing your story.
Is that how you originally started making music and creating music?
I started writing songs. I started playing songs when I was a kid, playing guitar, but I started writing songs when I was 10, So it was just this fascinating thing that I learned that I could do. And
do you consider yourself a storyteller? Or are you just using music as the vehicle to tell stories?
I'm a storyteller. I'm a songwriter. I write songs. That's what it is. I use other mediums, but really songs is the one that, for this particular setting, I'm an artist basically, but I happen to use songs. And I use visual art as well, but that's a different thing. But I just discovered that I could tell secrets with songs, and I could tell the unspoken story of my life with songs, and that I could move a truth, not necessarily the truth, a truth. I could tell a truth in a song, and that truth could be communicated, and that truth that I could tell with the song was bigger than me. It was a more universal thing.
And that's interesting when you apply that concept to the veterans community, and I had to apply it to myself when I was at the University of Texas and I was struggling, and the audience may have heard this a couple times, but once you kind of peel back what's underneath the surface and you start telling that story, that's where healing really begins,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that's what you guys and
Yes.
you are doing with Songwriting with Soldiers.
Yeah, but it's helping someone tell their story. I believe that it's very powerful to have the story. It's very powerful to tell yourself that story. I mean, that's the person that needs to hear your story is yourself.
What do you mean by tell yourself the story?
The hardest person to tell the truth to can be yourself.
And have you seen that happen with veterans?
Absolutely. I've seen it happen with me. I mean, it's hard to tell myself the truth. But when you tell yourself the truth, that's one thing. When you tell someone else the truth, that's another thing. It's easy to tell someone, I mean, we're all tribal, right? Everyone's tribal. Mm-hmm. It's easy to tell someone in your tribe your truth because they understand. They have the veterans community. Yeah, well, if I could just say, like songwriters and musicians, we can speak in shorthand. Like we just know what each other's talking about. Same way the veterans can speak in shorthand. Like I don't know what all those acronyms are. I say like I've never been in combat. Mm-hmm. So it's impossible for me to know that experience. And it's beautiful and fantastic and very meaningful to tell your story within your community, within your tribe. To tell your story to someone outside of your tribe is really scary. If that person outside of your tribe can hear your story without judgment, without attaching any value, pro or con, to your story, just hear it. Just hear it. And then hear it well enough to relay that story back to you in a song. That is a powerful thing. What it says is, I heard you, and there's beauty in your story, no matter the story. And I've heard lots of stories. It is possible to find beauty from deep, deep psychological and physical, moral, emotional pain.
Yes.
Beauty there.
And so that's actually one of the concepts that we have talked about at this table over and over again, mm-hmm. is that veterans who are struggling after service, to some degree, I think it's nice to know that it's not unique, that a lot of people go through these sorts of troubles.
Primal.
It's right. And two, I think it's also important for them to realize, like what you just said, is through the struggle, there can be good that comes out of it. And you've seen that good come out yes. with the veterans that you've worked with, or even in yourself, as you said earlier.
Yes, with myself, but in my life, the highest, this principle has been put into highest relief in this work that I've done with vets, and the whole veteran community. Like I'm not a vet, like I said, so I don't understand. I don't understand what it's like to be a vet. I'll never understand that.
Right.
I can have an understanding of that, and I can endeavor to not even empathize, but hear it neutrally.
Understand
hear it neutrally.
Okay.
That is the biggest thing. To hear another person neutrally, and to hear a story that kind of sometimes, occasionally, goes against everything I was taught as a child. Mm-hmm. These actions, these things that happen in combat. These experiences, I've never experienced that. Can I hear it neutrally? Can I just let it be said in the room? That is a powerful thing. And then to take that and transform it. The thing I've learned in songs is that putting out records, stuff like that, and getting things on the radio and video and all this kind of stuff. You can control the story. You can control the telling of the story. You can't control who hears the story. Like, I've never met Bruce Springsteen. Born to Run changed my life when I was 17 years old. It's not I don't have to know Bruce Springsteen to be moved by the song.
Music, yeah.
I'm so glad that Bruce Springsteen told that story. If he hadn't have told that story, I may not be sitting here.
So was that a seminal moment in your,
not
just your musical talent, but in your life?
It was a seminal moment, like seeing possibilities. So I'm so glad that Springsteen told that story. That story was probably not very easy to tell. So helping veterans tell their story, you never know who's going to hear this story. And so these stories are universal. They're bigger than just the one vet. And to see that their story is of value after service, after the usual bracket around service. Service is a lifelong thing. Service is a verb.
It continues.
It's a
yes.
verb,
Yeah,
man.
it shouldn't end after you leave the service.
I believe, I mean, one thing that I didn't start, the concept of the songwriting with soldiers when Mary and I first sat down to visualize how this was going to work. I didn't understand that exactly what I was walking into. I don't have a veteran relationship.
So can I pause you
Yeah,
right there?
sure.
So for the audience, when they're saying he didn't know what he was getting into, he's been writing songs and making music since he was the age of 10. What was the catalyst for him to go from being in the music community, being in the creative community, to all of a sudden saying, okay, now I need to help veterans tell stories?
Right.
What bridged that
Right.
gap?
It was a long process, a wandering process. I look at it like I had to be in the desert for about 10 years.
And what do you mean by desert?
I got lost in that I got, not lost, I got really bored with music. I got bored with the music work. It was traveling, working. I was about in my late 30s. I'd already had sort of an arc of a success.
Yeah.
And it's a grind, man. It's beautiful, but it's a
on the
grind.
road
Yeah, being
and
on the road, writing, recording,
playing, yeah.
touring. It's like, and the money is unstable. It's really hard on your families. The whole thing. I was looking for a different way to use songs because it's what I know I was kind of put on the planet to do, is write songs and tell stories. So I started a program where I worked with kids, like in schools, where I would go into schools and I would talk about, it was called the Be an Artist program. Seeing yourself as an artist. That work, and that's where I learned how to write songs with groups of people that weren't songwriters.
Was with these
With
students.
with kids, like 4th and 5th grade, like kids moving up. And I went up into high school. It has nothing to do with veterans yet. I don't even know this. I'm just exploring. And I did this all over America.
Did you enjoy that exploring?
I loved it, man. It was
being
so
off the road,
awesome.
trying something different.
And I was still on the road. I was still
Okay.
on the road doing this. I would just do this like a part-time. It was like a personal exploration I
Right.
had. And I set it up where I was doing it all over the country. And I'd go and I'd be at an elementary school during the day, and then I'd go do a gig that night. It's the same. And to me, I learned to see that it was where it looked like two very different things, but really, if I thought about it, it was the same thing.
Because you were using your talent
Still
just in a different
I'm using
realm.
my skills, and I'm still telling stories. I'm moving people. I'm making change. So that work led to working in a homeless shelter in Newark, New Jersey, where I'd go in and write with homeless teenagers, very urban kids. Okay, super different than how I grew up. So these urban Newark, New Jersey homeless kids. That's where I learned about the power of difference, where when you collaborate with someone who's very different than you, there's a unique power in that, and that you put two completely opposite experiences together, you can make something that's truly unique and bigger than either one of you.
Why do you enjoy collaboration?
I enjoy collaboration because, first off, other people have great ideas.
Sure.
The goal for me is
Exploring their ideas?
Just make a great thing. And if I was so brilliant, I'd be doing it on my own.
Right.
So
it takes a team, right?
Yeah, it takes a team. You can make it. I love working on my own. I'm as self-centered as the next artist, but I love bringing that to other people. But I did a lot of work with these homeless kids. That's where I learned the power of difference. I learned that everyone has a story, and through traumatic stories, because the homeless kids have traumatic stories, you can make a thing of beauty. And I learned about trauma transference, where
What's
at
that?
the end of a writing session, our collaboration session, the kids I was working with, and these were kids 15 to 21, they would feel fantastic.
Relieved?
Oh, they would be light, they'd be smiling.
almost,
And
yeah.
I'd feel like I'd been hit by a truck. And I would be depressed. And I'd be like depressed for days. And
Emotionally
crying,
down
emotionally just
and-
weighted, heavy. And that's called secondary trauma. It is a thing that, EMT guys, ministers, a lot of psychologists.
Carrying the burdens of another
You take
person.
on the burdens of another person. You fill up your pack.
Yeah,
Okay?
sure.
So I learned about that. Then from that, it led to doing work with conflict resolution, using songwriting, getting people who are like opposed to each
Opposing
other to write,
sides?
like gangs, Crips and Bloods. I've done it with Crips and Bloods. I've done it with Israeli
So you
Palestinian
walk into
groups.
a room
Walk
and
into a
you
room. People are on the
different
opposite
gang
sides.
members?
Yeah, people are on the opposite sides of the room. I'm going, awesome. I'm from Texas. I'm a songwriter, and you know,
We're going to talk about our.
Well, I could talk.
upbringing?
No, I don't ever say, "Hey, we're gonna write a song, guys. Isn't that cool?" And we're gonna get along and work together. You never say that. You say, "Hey, I'm from Texas. You know, I'm a songwriter. Here's what I do. You can write a song about anything. Anybody got an idea?" Boom, the idea comes. Great. What rhymes with Newark? You know, it's like, what rhymes with street? You know, and pretty soon the ideas are coming over. And I never say, "Isn't this beautiful, all working together?" At the end of the session, I go, "Wow, isn't that cool? We wrote this song. This song didn't exist. I'm so glad everyone was in the room, because if any of you weren't in the room, the song wouldn't be the same."
So the light bulbs come on after that?
Some of them. I mean, when they walk out of the room, they're still homeless kids. These kids are still homeless kids in a shelter in Newark, New Jersey, that are in gangs. However, with the Israeli-Palestinian groups I worked with, two of them fell in love.
Wow.
So it's possible to. That's where I learned actually utilizing the power of difference, consciously stepping outside of your bubble. Is power. That's
Is
power.
that something you were born with the ability to step out of that?
No,
is it a muscle you've worked on?
It's a muscle. I think I was born with a level of awareness of a surrounding in a different way. I mean, I think I'm an artist, you know, from an early age, even though I didn't know what art was.
Right.
But then, after that, I was in Landstuhl in Germany, and I was doing a concert at the hospital there on the base. And
can you tell the audience
who
was in the hospital?
Yeah,
how did you get set up with this?
Landstuhl is a base in Western Germany, big base hospital, and my friend Helen Patton, who's George Patton's granddaughter,
wow. is royalty.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I happened to meet her, you know, and she invited me to come do this concert, and I was performing for about 60 men. I think it was all men, and they'd just flown back from Iraq the night before, and they were getting checked out in the hospital. All of them were, none of them were visibly wounded, but there was internal wounds, you know, I guess you would say.
Right.
And it was so uncomfortable and awkward. I'd never been around veterans, and they were not listening to my music at all. Like there was no reason.
Totally zoned out.
Totally zoned out. They were one day out of Iraq,
right.
dude. There was like, we were at this cafeteria, like food was going crazy. It was just like they were just cutting up.
Yeah.
You know? It was great.
And you were up there playing music, and you were like, how do I get out of this?
Exactly. I couldn't wait to leave the room. And I thought, I have nothing in common with these people. They have nothing in common with me. This is ridiculous. And I'm packing up my guitar at the end of the show, and a guy comes up to me, a guy named Fred Kale, a Marine.
Yeah, hoorah.
And, which I didn't even know, like, the insignia, like, I didn't know.
Yeah, you don't understand the rank.
I don't know anything about this guy.
What the camis.
And he's just this huge dude in a uniform. Yeah. And he comes up and he recognizes the kind of guitar I play, which is a Collings guitar. It's made here in Austin. And I'm like, wow, how do you know about Collings? And he goes, oh, my brother-in-law plays them. It's like, oh, who's your brother-in-law? Is he in a band, whatever? And he goes, yeah, he's in a band called Beau Soleil, which is this famous Cajun band. And I'm like, your brother-in-law's in Beau Soleil? And he goes, yeah. I was like, wow, is your brother the guitar player in Beau Soleil? And he goes, yeah. He goes, David? And he goes, yeah. And I went, wow, that's weird, because I know your brother-in-law. And I said, wow, it's like weird. And are you from Southern Louisiana? He goes, no, I'm from Northern Louisiana. And I said, oh, where? He goes, Monroe. And well, when I was a kid, I used to go play in Monroe, Louisiana.
Wow.
Well, I could, 21 years old, 20, and I used to play there. I played in this club, and he goes, yeah, Enoch's. And I went, yeah, I used to play at Enoch's. And I go, do you know the guy who ran that club? And he goes, Doyle. And I go, yeah, do you know Doyle? And he goes, yeah, Doyle was the best man at my wedding.
I went,
dude, I know, it literally.
Did it change your perspective?
Dan, it spun my head around, man. It spun my head around. And I said, up until 3 minutes ago, I didn't think I had anything in common with anyone in this room. And you're the first person that walked up to me, and I know your brother-in-law and the best man in your wedding. And I was like, I want to write a song with you.
Really?
I said, I want to write a song.
That's the most natural response,
well, it was
right?
like, you're fascinating. And we talked about it. We stood and talked. I'd never spoken to a man. I'd never really consciously spoken to a man in uniform. Okay? And we stood and talked for 2 hours.
Man.
and heard about service. And it's weird. I mean, I'm a civilian. I'm an artist. I'm
much different culture, background, experiences.
Seemingly,
Okay.
But I heard about Iraq and buying guitars in Iraq and like ouds and how many guitars there are in Iraq and all this stuff and at one point I went, this is weird. I've never really stood around and talked to a guy in uniform, and he said, well, we're all wearing uniforms. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you look like an artist. You look like a musician. And I realized, I wear the musician uniform. Everybody's got a uniform. And he goes, yeah, underneath every uniform's a human being.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's deep, really deep.
And that was your connection.
And from that moment,
–
we hatched the idea. It went through a couple more years of working on it, but that was the original spark. Was that? And from that, it took me about a year and a half after that to actually get it going.
So what have the responses been then from other musicians that you work with that didn't have that firsthand experience?
Absolutely.
And you're selling them this idea, and you say, come talk to these veterans. They just either got back from conflict, they're dealing with this.
Two responses. Well, three responses. The first response that I get is, awesome, how do I get in? Because everyone, and we with Songwriting with Soldiers, we consciously bring in, there's some criteria that you have to get in before you can get in to be one of the songwriters. A, you have to be really, really good at your craft. And it's a craft of co-writing, not just writing, co-writing, where two people are in a room, and it's really a Nashville-based co-writing method.
Is that a confidence in what they're doing?
It's not a confidence, it's a willingness to listen.
Okay.
It's an idea, you're bringing in totally...
Being open-minded about what the other person's
But you're also bringing in a
experienced.
full arsenal of craft. And you're sitting down with someone who has a full arsenal of craft, and you go, let's go. And it's like, turn it on, go. You don't have time to go, oh, what's going on? It's like, we got to write a song in 3 hours. Go.
Yeah.
So that's a certain skill set. Then they have to already have had a career. So you can't, to work with Songwriting with Soldiers, you can't be looking to just bolster your bio.
Credentials.
You already have to have a career. You have to, because we're not trying to, we want people who are past the point of striving. You're striving, but you're striving for a different thing.
Yeah.
And then you have
You're giving back to the community.
Then you have to be nice. You have to be cool. Like you have to be, you can't be a jerk.
That is probably an undervalued quality in just about every
but
line
you cannot.
of work.
But there's no room for that in
Being
our
a
world.
jerk. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be able to keep your mouth shut in the writing session. Everyone has opinions. Political, religious, cultural, ethical, everyone's got opinions. In this work, you keep them to yourself. If someone is going to express their opinions, let it be the vet. And you can hear, you can interact a little, but there's no politics. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on. It doesn't matter. It's us in this situation. So that's when bringing people in. So the first response is, in saying that, the first response is, awesome, how do I get in? Because they recognize this is an amazing way to use our creativity. There are people who go, yes, I want to help the vets, which is beautiful. This is not about helping vets. This is about helping everybody. We do this, our work, Songwriting with Soldiers, is focused towards the veteran community. It's as much about helping civilians as it is helping vets, because civilians need to hear these stories.
As well, yes.
Yes, and civilians' lives are changed.
That's why I'm so happy to have you here, because that is something that we talk about on this platform as well, is trying to close the gap between the civilian and veteran culture, and you guys are out there doing it, and the veterans are with you.
I call it the imaginary divide.
Right.
It's an imaginary divide.
And you've reached out.
Okay, so the reason I felt like I had nothing in common in Landstuhl with those men who were there is because I was telling myself I had nothing in common. As soon as I stopped telling myself I had nothing in common, it opened up the space to find common ground. As long as we tell ourselves, oh, they're different, they're going to be different.
Yeah.
As soon as you tell yourself, they're probably the same as me with different experiences, it's a lot easier. So the third, I got to tell you, the third response, and I've only had this a couple times, but it was riveting and almost maddening. The response is why would you want to work with people like that? And my response is, it's because people think that. People think, someone thinks, why would you want to work with people like that? That's why I'm doing this work. It's to combat that idea.
Right.
That is like.
You are almost the reason I'm doing
yeah,
this.
I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this because of
you.
Of that.
Yeah.
And not even
that
you.
Ignorance.
That idea. That idea. Why would you do this? Because they're a human being who have volunteered. Everyone volunteers now to go do something that I didn't want to do. And I have the luxury of driving from Florida to Seattle if I would like to.
Right.
And I'm totally safe. I got no worries. That's it. So those are the three responses. And it's getting easier and easier. You know, one of the songwriters that works with us is a guy named Gary Burr. Mm-hmm. And sorry, I'm gonna scratch your hand. So Gary Burr. Gary Burr has written like 17 #1 hits in Nashville. He's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame. Oh, yeah. He reminds me of like the most jaded, cynical musician there is. You know,
he's been everywhere. He's seen it all.
He writes music for money.
Unimpressed by everything now?
Totally.
Yeah.
He's totally unimpressed. He came down and did a retreat, and he wrote this amazing songs. I mean, they're incredible. And after the retreat, he turned to me and he goes, and by the way, I'm super intimidated by Gary Burr because he's like this #1 hit songwriter. So I'm standing there next to this guy who's like, you know, like the
God,
dude,
yeah.
you know. And it's like if you're a boat builder and you're standing next to Noah, you know. And Gary Burr turns to me and he goes, you know, Darden, I forgot what music was for. This is why we all play music.
Is that one of the best compliments you've received?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the peak. This is why we make music. It's not, there's about the money part, but it's really to have that human connection through music. It's magical. There's no other medium that's quite like it. Other mediums create different connections. Music is truly unique, and we get to operate within music and words to tell stories that couldn't be told any other way. And those stories are told that spread out and can change many, many lives.
For a veteran who is watching this, or for a family member of a veteran, they want to know how to be involved. How can they either reach out to you, get in touch with the organization?
Absolutely. I recommend they go to songwritingwithsoldiers.org.
Okay.
And it's all one word, Songwriting with Soldiers. And send us a note, send us a message. It's possible to make a donation if you'd like to, but also because we are a nonprofit. But you can listen to all the music. You can listen to it, download it, you know.
And they can find that.
You can find
songwritingwithsoldiers.org.
And you can go in, and if you have a certain writer that's been working with us and you want to know, or if you know somebody who's been through the program, there's a song search. Just type in their name, you can hear their song.
One last thing I want to ask you. So if veterans out there, let's say the person they're talking to is a psychologist, or they're talking with a social worker, or maybe just their spouse, any words of wisdom that you would give them for being able to peel back some of those difficult layers? So at the beginning of the conversation, you talked about making sure that they expose some of that stuff. Is there a trait, or is there a characteristic, or is there just an approach maybe that you would provide them to have a healthy experience for them to be able to overcome some of those difficulties?
Well, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist or a healer. I'm a songwriter. The one thing that is I think needed is listening more than speaking. And so the listener is key to the speaking. So the person listening, the spouse, the parent, they have to listen. Mm-hmm. And as much as possible, I think it's hard, it's loaded. I mean, these are hard, you know. The wives need to be listened to as much as the soldier does.
Yes.
It's just as hard.
Both ways.
Kids, man, we work with kids. It's hard. And so listening. And I think, you know, I don't know how to answer your question because I don't know that there is a one way.
Specific way to do
like,
it.
I'm not there. I know how we do it. And the way that I open the conversation up always is, tell me why you joined the military. That's fascinating, for one thing. Why does someone join the military? I didn't.
And maybe it's as simple as, you know, having that conversation is starting in the initial step. Take the first step. Just talked about the military. Just take the first step, a small step, a baby step.
And be willing to go follow that conversation. And then, if someone needs help, they need help, And be also, I think having boundaries, in that some things you shouldn't say and all that kind of thing. But I don't know. That's a big one. I don't know that I know how to answer that question.
Well, I think
other than I know how I do it.
Right, and I think certainly from the veterans' perspective, for me, and I think probably you've seen it firsthand with songwriting with soldiers, is taking that first step, either reaching out to somebody or talking with a spouse or a friend or a fellow veteran, and that's here why at Next Gen Warrior we hope to provide an outlet and a role model for veterans across this great state so they can see ways for them and they can see their peers succeed and go on to continue to serve in their communities, because veterans who get out of the service, veterans that you've worked with, are still so young. They have so much to provide, and I want to thank you for being a part of the team that has reached out to cross the cultural divide, and also thank you for using your skills.
It's made my life better.
Absolutely, and I think
it's improved my life. There's a million ways. I will say this to veterans out there who are listening. As a civilian, I'm a part of the 99% that didn't serve. Okay, I'm front and center. I didn't serve in that way. I'm serving now in a different way. But we need you to lead us, because the military community understands leadership, understands service in a way that civilians don't. They understand the concept of having someone's back is almost impossible to find in the civilian world. We need the military to lead us in the civilian life, not from a militaristic, everybody's not going to go to boot camp. It's not about jingoism. It's not about that. It's about commitment, service, showing up on time. Just that. It's
doing the small things.
But the small things, but also just how to live, how to bring those cultural, some of those lessons learned in the military community, to bring that in to show everyday civilians what it's like to serve, to give to another person, to help regardless. Help regardless. That is something that is I've seen it manifested time and time again from the military community to other people. It's something that is missing in large areas in the civilian life.
Well,
we need you.
Well, that's why we're here, and that's why we have this podcast. And I'd like to thank you for taking your time to come here to talk about these lessons. I don't think I can close it any better than what you just said right there, because so many of those themes that you talked about, veterans continuing to serve and lead in their communities, is really what we're trying to discuss here and promote here. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dan.
Keep up all the good work.
All right.
Thank you for watching us here at the Next Gen Warrior podcast, as always brought to you by the Veterans Land Board, Chairman George P. Bush. Signing off. We'll see you next time. Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.